This is the 5-minute guide to the SMS Blucher, a unique armored cruiser of the Imperial German Navy. The Blucher was designed at a critical time of change in naval history, which meant she ended up being both a superb ship and obsolete at the same time. Why do I say this? Let's look in more detail. Prior to the mid-1900s and the start of the dreadnought era, there were two kinds of cruisers, the protected cruiser and the armored cruiser. The protected cruiser was cheap, fast and armed with many small caliber guns, but no side armor, only a protective deck keeping the magazines and engines safe from small caliber gunfire. These ships were for commerce protection, fleet scouting, and later as the leaders of, and counters to torpedo boats and destroyers. By contrast, the armored cruiser was often used in smaller navies as a replacement for battleships, and in larger navies they were usually the flagships of foreign station squadrons. They had belt armor, and were often actually longer than battleships, although slightly lighter due to their need for relatively high speed. They were designed to be able to destroy any other cruiser they might encounter, and outrun any battleship that might outgun them. They often carried a mixed main battery, a few guns in the 7 to 9.2 inch range for dealing with other armored cruisers, and for overwhelming smaller ships, and a number of 4 to 6 inch guns for general rapid fire against all targets. The last British armored cruisers, the Warrior and Minotaur classes, had shown a trend towards larger main guns, carrying varying mixes of 7.5 inch and 9.2 inch guns. The contemporary German ships, the Rune and Scharnhorst classes, used mixed batteries of 8.2 inch and 5.9 inch guns in a similar manner. However, with the launch of HMS Dreadnought, it was not only battleships that changed. The British started talking about so-called dreadnought armored cruisers. But they didn't say exactly what they meant by this, so the Germans imagined this to mean an end to mixed batteries and instead a unified main battery of the same heavy guns armored cruisers had used before. This was after all the main idea behind dreadnought battleships, so they effectively made a scaled down version of the Nassau class battleships, right down to the stability issues. This meant the Blucher carried 12 8.2 inch guns and 6 twin turrets in a hexagonal layout for a broadside of 8 guns per side, along with a secondary battery of 5.9 inch guns, only there were 8 instead of 12. They shared an identical tertiary battery of 16 88mm guns, and finally the Blucher had 4 torpedo tubes, the Nassau had 6. The Blucher was also somewhat faster than existing armored cruisers at 25 knots instead of the usual 23, again much like the HMS Dreadnought's speed advantage over older battleships, although like the Nassau it still used the old triple expansion engines. Finally, the belt armor was also improved from 6 inches to 7.1 inches. To be honest, if you moved a couple of turrets to super firing positions, and dropped the 5th and 6th in exchange for a bit more engine power, you would have a ship that would make a perfectly fine heavy cruiser in the post-war environment. Unfortunately, just as the design was finalized, it turned out the British had not meant an armored cruiser with a uniform cruiser-grade armament. They had meant taking dreadnought battleship caliber guns and sticking them on an armored cruiser hull. The resulting Invincible class was not as well protected as the Blucher, but it was faster, and the 12-inch main armament vastly outranged and outgunned the 8.2-inch battery. The Blucher now had exactly the enemy it couldn't deal with: one, it could not outgun, but also could not outrun. As a result, it was the only ship of its type, and the Germans got down to designing the Von der Tann, Germany's first battle cruiser. Because she was a far superior ship to any other armored cruiser, and also because Germany was short on battle cruisers, the Blucher was assigned to the 1st Scouting Group in 1914 alongside the rest of the battle cruisers, having spent the previous 3 years as a gunnery training ship. Initially she operated as part of a German fleet trying to lure out element of the Russian fleet for destruction, but these were unsuccessful. Operations against British targets were more successful, with a bombardment of Great Yarmouth resulting in some damage being inflicted on the town and the sinking of the British submarine D5. However, the German armored cruiser York made a navigational error on the way home and sank in a German minefield. The next bombardment mission targeted Scarborough, Hartlepool, and Whitby. During the bombardment of Hartlepool, the Blucher was hit 6 times by coastal batteries, but suffered minimal damage thanks to her comprehensive protection against lighter caliber guns. Coming back from the raid, having successfully lured out a portion of the Grand Fleet, a series of miscommunications and unclear objectives on both sides meant the two fleets missed each other. Her last action would come at the Battle of Dogger Bank, which started as an attempt to destroy British light scouting forces in the area. However, due to British intelligence services, the British battle cruisers had sailed to intercept, and the German forces did not have Von der Tann with them as it was undergoing maintenance. Outnumbered and outgunned, the Germans turned to head home, but due to wartime shortages of high-quality coal, the Germans were limited to 23 knots, as without this fuel Blucher could not reach her 25-knot design speed. At the rear of the German line, the Blucher became the primary target for each British ship as it came into range. She fought back as best she could, temporarily knocking out one of HMS Lion's forward guns with a non-penetrating hit on the turret, but in return, was subjected to a barrage of 13.5 and 12-inch shells which she was never designed to face. With fires burning everywhere and flooding in multiple places, the Blucher began to lose speed and fall out of line. Nevertheless, she kept fighting, scoring a hit each on the HMS Tiger and HMS Indomitable, and fighting off attempts by light cruisers and destroyers to finish her off. It couldn't last, and the HMS Aurora scored a pair of torpedo hits, at which point only the rear turret was operational, although it was still firing back at anything that came too close. Another salvo of 7 torpedoes scored multiple hits and the ship capsized shortly after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. British destroyers closed in to rescue survivors, but the German Zeppelin airship L5 thought the Blucher was a British battle cruiser and tried to bomb the destroyers, which withdrew. As a result, somewhere between 750 and 800 of her crew did not survive. Although she was lost, confusion in the British fleet after damage to HMS Lion meant the British wasted time shooting up an already sinking ship and not going after the remaining German battle cruisers, who would therefore survive to take part in the Battle of Jutland. As such, the loss of the Blucher is technically at least partially responsible for the destruction of 3 British battle cruisers in that battle. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below.